For the first time in the history of the CFP Elimination Series here on College Football Red Zone, we have a power conference team potentially on the chopping block as the New Mexico Lobos, fresh off of their very first win of the year, travel to the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California, in order to take on the Bruins of UCLA. And it's a rare Friday night lights game happening at 10 p.m. Eastern on the Big Ten Network. So this is going to be a night game, and it's going to be really a pre-Hawaii test, to say the least, before things get hot and heavy for your Saturday college football experience. But even though New Mexico has not been perfect by any means, this Lobos team actually has been competitive thus far in both of their games. Obviously, winning against Idaho State, otherwise they wouldn't have any wins, or frankly, they would have been eliminated by now. But they were also surprisingly competitive against Michigan. Yes, they lost the game, but they certainly gave them their fits as well. While on the opposite end, UCLA, they're still trying to search for their first win in the year. They were blown out by Utah to begin the year, and then they had a somewhat close loss to UNLV, but they were also down significantly against UNLV at the half. They were down 23-0 at one point. So, listen, I'm not going to lie to you guys, on paper, this game should seem like a straightforward affair for UCLA to earn their first win in the season. But at the same time, though, even though UCLA is going to be heavily favored on FanDuel and is going to be heavily favored in our internal power rating metrics, and we're actually going to pull them up right now. In both cases, we do see UCLA as more than a two-touchdown favorite. In this case, in times like this, I like to really sit down and take a look. Hey, if the upset was to happen, how would it go down? How would it truly go down, right? So, if New Mexico is going to pull this upset off, there's five things that do need to happen I think, in order for New Mexico to be able to walk into the Rose Bowl and take them down in Pasadena, right? So, it starts off with winning the turnover battle. UCLA's defense has struggled in its first couple of games against up-tempo or just really that change of pace in terms of offensive game planning. We saw this against Utah, and we did see this as well against UNLV. So hypothetically, if Jack Lane can avoid making risky throws, making mistakes, and the New Mexico defense be opportunistic, forcing Amalave to maybe rush some decisions, get into the quarterback, or maybe even, like stripping Jed Thomas, for example, maybe getting a fumble recovery here or there, creating those extra possessions, especially if you can get them in plus territory too, that would be massive in terms of boosting New Mexico's chances in terms of winning this football game. And I'm not talking about like a slight edge. You may be looking at New Mexico winning that turnover battle by two or more. I think that's really the first ingredient in terms of making that successful. In addition, if you're the New Mexico offense, I think it's going to be important for you to dictate tempo as well, right? Really make UCLA play your type of game instead of playing UCLA's game. Winning the time possession is obviously going to be important. I think there's certainly no secret in that. But if you can control the tempo with your offense, and I mean establishing Humphrey on the ground, that'll not only shorten up the game, but it'll also keep UCLA's offense on the sideline and help them get a little bit cold. You can sustain multiple 10 to 12 play drives. That, in essence, will eat the clock, and it'll limit UCLA's ability to pull away and really get this to a situation where in the fourth quarter, it's a close game, and now you really get to see UCLA possibly pressing a little bit more because of what happened in the first couple of games and really feeling that pressure of finding a way to come out on top. So that's ingredient number 2 for New Mexico. In addition to that, how about the red zone efficiency, right? I think that's going to be really important as well for both teams, but particularly for the Lobos. If you're New Mexico, you cannot settle for field goals when you get into plus territory. I'm talking about when you cross midfield, They gotta finish drives with touchdown. And, you could use Jack Lane's dual threat ability, you can use his legs, you could use his arms, but I think a lot's going to really ride particularly on Jack Lane in terms of making sure that New Mexico does get into the end zone and really keep UCLA off balance. Obviously, as well, special teams always plays a huge part in these kind of upsets as well. The upset formula always involves a big return or a block hit or maybe some kind of hidden yardage edge. And I'm talking about maybe you have a field position advantage, like maybe on average UCLA is starting on its own 25-yard line, but New Mexico, their average field position starts at like the 35 or the 40 on their side of the field. If you can create that kind of advantage that doesn't naturally pop up in the box scores, that's going to be extremely critical. And it goes back to what I mentioned at first in terms of controlling the tempo and dictating terms in terms of how the game is going to be played. That would really help New Mexico out as well. And then finally, force UCLA to be a one-dimensional offense. We know that Nico is a dynamic quarterback dating back from his times at Tennessee, but he's also not necessarily the best passer either. So if you can get UCLA into third and long situations, you could absolutely bait Nico into making some mistakes. We did see those mistakes unfold in the UNLV game as well as the Utah game as well. So that's really going to be the key. Win the turnover battle, control tempo, finish in the red zone, win on special teams, and then defensively, you're forcing UCLA to be one-dimensional. Get them into those third and long situations. That's the 5 ingredients. And I think you're probably going to need at least 4 in order to make this upset happen. Now, do I think the upset happens? I think that even though that this is a very lopsided game in the betting markets right now, UCLA is a 2-touchdown favorite. And then my internal power rating model has UCLA favored even higher, is 18-point favorite. I'm gonna absolutely disagree with the model. I think that this is a possible upset alert happening in the wings. New Mexico played Michigan incredibly tough. And Michigan, even though this was in a big house, which is a much more tougher environment than what UCLA has to experience, that team is much more highly regarded than his UCLA team. And New Mexico played them incredibly tough. So I'm looking at UCLA. They've already been blown out. They've already also lost to UNLV. And UNLV only won by a possession, but it really should have been a much more lopsided game if we're being honest with ourselves. They were down 23-0 at one point in the second half. That being said, I do think UCLA pulls this off. But I think this game is also going to be a whole lot closer than what people are going to be expecting. I'm going to go with UCLA winning 31-24. So I think the Bruins do get their first win of the year. Because laying out all the terms of the upset, New Mexico is going to have to play, maybe not perfect, but they're going to have to be pretty close to perfect. And while I'm higher on New Mexico than maybe what I was when the season first started in terms of my preseason expectations, I'm not necessarily there yet where I feel like they're ready to pull off an upset against a power conference opponent. Even though UCLA probably in that lowest tier in terms of actually, competing in the Big Ten. So I'm going with UCLA winning. I think New Mexico is a year away from seriously challenging these power conference teams. But with that being said, I think this game is going to be a lot more interesting than what people are going to realize.